What's up, guys? Today we're talking about a really great yield farming opportunity that could potentially come with a huge airdrop in the coming months. This opportunity is Hyperliquid. I will show you guys how you could start farming Hyperliquid, and more specifically, we're going to talk about the setup I currently have, which is a hedge setup or a pseudo delta neutral setup. And we'll go through the process as well as my current profit and loss to show you guys how I'm doing. And before we begin, I just want to update you guys on my core portfolio. I'm still sitting in nice profit here on my open positions. Not much changes. Most of these are sitting in a positive. Some of them are in a loss here, but overall still doing pretty good, averaging roughly 40 to 50% APR on my assets right now. But before we dive in, I can't guarantee results, right? I'm not your financial advisor. This is not financial advice. But hopefully these videos would inform you more about yield farming and make you a better yield farmer. So why did I start farming Hyperliquid? Big shout out to Stonkrates here. I've known him from the Sappy Seals NFT community for a very long time, and he has really good airdrop alpha. So be sure to follow him if you guys are more interested in farming airdrops. But basically, the main idea is 5% of Hyperliquid's supply is going to be used to reward the Hyper EVM, and the fully diluted value of Hyperliquid at the time of this post is 20 billion, which would be roughly 1 billion worth of airdrop spread between not a lot of people at all. And if we look at the stats right now, the FDV actually climbed all the way up to 38 billion, so almost double in less than a month. So definitely a more underfarmed and a great opportunity right now. You guys can check out this thread and go ahead and give him a follow. But what I'm currently doing right now is basically I'm providing liquidity for wrapped hype and USDT0, which is Tether's stablecoin. And I also have a hype short set up to hedge my position on Hyperliquid. I started roughly with $4,000 in these two positions, so we could see my current P&L by simply adding these two numbers together. So 3227.69 plus 842.39, that's roughly $4,070, sitting in $70 worth of profit right now because I entered roughly at $34.2. Now the price has moved up a little bit, and because I only have a partial hedge set up, I'm in a little bit of profit. And you can see this loss on my short here, and this is the LP position. Sometimes the US dollar value takes a while to update. That's why I use this Rabbi wallet to see the profit and loss. But why did I start with a partial hedge? After doing some research, I'm very bullish on hype. But at the same time, when I entered at $34.2 here yesterday, it's trading at quite a high price, right? It's near its previous all-time high. So by definition, if I'm completely long hype, then I'm top blasting. Of course, if I did that, I would be in a higher profit right now compared to a hedge setup. But that's also a higher risk if we see a retrace on hype. So that's why I'm partially hedged, even though I'm bullish on Hyperliquid. So if you want to buy into hype, but you're worried about the high price, like I am, then you could consider this setup or other delta neutral setups. But in a nutshell, it's basically a crypto to stable pool hedge with a short. And how do we actually go about setting this up? The first step I want to do is actually figure out my profit and loss at different price points. So I decided to start with a 3-to-1 ratio. I had roughly $4,000 of capital, right? Which means that I'm yield farming with $3,000 and I'm using that extra $1,000 to short hype. That's like an insurance against the price dropping. So if I short hype with roughly 1x the size of my account, which effectively is a 1x leverage, even though it shows 2x here, it's 1x on my entire account, right? When I shorted hype at 34.18 here, the size is 29.24. So 29.24 times 34.18, that's roughly $1,000 that I was talking about, right? So this becomes the liquidation point based on the margin I need to maintain. And then I want to work backwards from there, right? What I want to do is pull up this impermanent loss calculator, put in the value of deposit. Let's say I'm depositing 3,000 into the liquidity pool. Then the price lower and price upper is the bottom and upper range. I deposited roughly at 34.35. So this V deposit here is the value of the liquidity pool, right? At the time of deposit is $3,000. But what I can do here is just click on this curve and then drag it to roughly my liquidation point at $61. You could see my LP value would be worth roughly $4,100. So if my short gets liquidated, I'm actually at a $100 profit. So it's only a partial hedge, right? If I'm fully hedged, then at my liquidation price, I would be at $4,000. And you guys could adjust this based on the range you set, right? If I wanted to go for a more aggressive range, for example, price lower, I could do 20. Price upper, I could go 300. And again, if the price moves to $61, my LP value would be at 4,356. But when I do that, there's going to be more drawdown as well, right? If we look at the price of the chart, it's not unreasonable to see hype at $15 again. So let's look at that scenario. It's basically my worst case scenario to be seeing hype trading at $15. If that happened with this wider upper range, my LP value would be worth only $1,417 compared to the previous range I have, which has price lower at 15, price upper at 185. The lower LP value would be slightly higher at 1561. So about $100 more than if I had a more aggressive range. And as long as the price is trading above this entry here at 34.35, I'm at a US dollar profit, not even counting the fees because the hedge is only partial, right? So this is exactly what we want to figure out in a hedge position. We basically want to figure out our liquidation point, how much size we're going to short with, and what are the worst case scenarios, right? In this case, I would lose a little bit of money if Hype's price dropped all the way to $15. Again, you can see the LP value would only be at 1571. But if you look at my short here, I changed the take profit price to be at $15. The profit from my short is roughly only $560, which is not enough to cover my losses because my liquidity pool started with $3,000, right? At $15 of hype, my LP value would be 1561. So the loss is roughly 1439. So if I have 1561 left in my LP value plus the profit from the short, if I decide to close the short and flip long, then I would be left with 2,121. But in addition to that, I have the balance on my Hyperliquid account, which is roughly $1,000, right? So then my actual capital would be down to only 3,121. If we minus that by 4,000 and divide it by 4,000, I would be down roughly 22%, which is not too bad in my opinion because it's quite a big drawdown, right? If we measure from roughly $34 to $15, that's a 56% drawdown. And with this setup, my loss would only be roughly 22% compared to if I just bought Hype directly at that price, right? Without a hedge, $4,000 times 0.44 because of a 56% loss, right? My liquidity value would be only worth $1,760. So pretty good risk and reward in my opinion. And again, if Hype's price floats higher and gets near my liquidation point, I could choose to close out the position for a profit anytime I want. And that's before even counting the yield, right? So let's count the yield right now. I deposited roughly at this time, 24 hours ago. So we could analyze the fees, right? The first fee we're getting is this $3.87 from this liquidity pool. So 3.87 plus the funding fee, because a lot of times when the funding rate is positive, which means there's more people longing Hype, I'm gaining this amount of APR on the size of my short. So in 24 hours, it's roughly 1.23. So that LP fee plus 1.23, roughly $5.1. It doesn't seem like a lot, but it's a pretty decent amount for a wide range LP and a small short, right? If we analyze that at times 365, that's 1861, and then divided by our initial capital at $4,000, I'm expected to get roughly 46% APR. Assuming again, if this funding fee that I get from shorting hype stays the same, when the funding rate is positive, shorts get paid, the longs are paying the shorts, and I'm getting the yield from this liquidity pool as well. And why did I start with a 3-to-1 ratio in terms of liquidity pool to the hedge? Because $1,000 worth of hedge is enough for me. I don't mind a small loss, and I want to actually park more liquidity here because I suspect that more liquidity providers on HyperSwap is going to get a bigger airdrop than just people that are shorting the market, right? That's why I have a more imbalanced approach here. And if you guys click on this points tab, there are other ways to earn points as well. If you guys are interested in doing this, then be sure to run your own numbers. You could run your own ranges as well. Run the simulation, change the range to match your market outlook. And depending on how much you want to hedge, you want to make sure that you work out the numbers beforehand, right? And if you guys want another more simple delta neutral setup, you could basically buy the hype token and deposit it in one of these protocols, but be sure to make sure you do your own research on these protocols. And then we could balance out with a short if you guys want a more completely delta neutral setup. And that could be good if you're holding a lot of stable coins. You don't want market exposure, but you want hype exposure, right? In case there's an airdrop, you could provide liquidity for stuff like hype to loop hype or hype to stake hype as well. If you want to farm this app for the airdrop and to be completely delta neutral for this setup, you want to make sure that you have a 1-to-1 hedge, right? So if I stake or provide liquidity for 100 hype, for example, and then I want to make sure that I'm shorting with a 100 hype worth of size if you want to be completely delta neutral. Or you could be slightly biased long or short, right? If you think hypes is going to retrace, then you might have a 110 or 120 size of short rather than a completely delta neutral setup, right? Just like in my liquidity pool example, I only have a partial hedge, so I'm biased towards the long side. And the question you might be asking is, what if my short gets liquidated, right? Then you basically close out whatever positions you have open in the liquidity pool and go back to stablecoin before you hop into a fresh setup, right? Because with this setup, theoretically, if you have a 1-to-1 hedge with 100 hype, for example, with every dollar increase in hype's price, you're going to lose $100 on your short, but you're going to make $100 on your gain, right? And then let's say hype goes to like $60, it's near your liquidation point, then you could close out all of those positions and then restart from there, right? With whatever US dollar you accrued, you could basically buy some more hype and then short hype again. And if we just look at the funding rate here, we could figure out the rough APR. So for the last 24 hours, it's 1.23 that I gained. We analyze it by multiplying 365 and divided by my initial capital for the short. So roughly a 44.89% APR on the short. And if you guys are doing a 1-to-1 long to short, right, with the LP of hype with stake hype as an example, then because you're only earning the short APR on half of your capital, if you're using like very low leverage like I am, right, then the APR gets cut in half, which is roughly 22.45%, which is quite high already and is something that you could consider using your stablecoin for. But again, these funding rates fluctuate all the time. I've talked to some people that are farming hype. They did get pretty nice APR from shorting hype and a delta neutral setup like what I described. And if the APR doesn't sustain, you could choose to close out your position at any time as well, right? And what I just showed you guys with this hype to USDT setup could be used with everything, right? Like Ethereum to USDC or Sol to USDC if you want a more hedge or delta neutral setup. But the key thing here is making sure that you're running the simulation beforehand. You know exactly how much money you're going to make if the market pumps, right? And you know exactly how much money you're going to lose if the market dumps. And for a more hedge setup or a pseudo delta neutral setup, I personally prefer a crypto to stable pair. I see some people pairing like stuff like maybe AI16Z or Farcoin with Sol and then shorting those two tokens. I personally don't like those setups because with a crypto to crypto pool, there are more things that could go wrong. For example, if I'm pairing Ethereum to Solana, and I'm shorting both Sol to ETH, a lot of times I might have a lot of divergence loss and I might be completely stuck with Solana, for example, if Sol to ETH dumps by a lot, right? But then the US dollar value of Ethereum and Sol could be grinding upwards and my shorts could be still liquidated and my profits would not be as much as if I were doing a crypto to stable setup, right? So there's much more complexity there. That's why I stick with a crypto to stable pool when I'm running a more hedge setup. And another mistake I see is that people short too heavily on a more hedge or delta neutral setup. For example, if I were to use that $1,000 and then short at a 2x or a 5x leverage, you could see I would be quickly liquidated here. I would have missed out on these fees. And then it's very hard to adjust your strategy if you're getting liquidated all the time, right? There's no need to use high leverage for these setups. And you can see my ranges are quite wide. A lot of people run very tight ranges and they get wrecked doing this type of setup, right? So keep the ranges wide, keep the leverages low. That's how you can get the most safety with this type of setup. And I'm still earning a nice 40 to 50% APR, right? It's not like I'm earning only like 5% APR and then I'm taking all of this risk, right? And lastly, I saw a lot of these strategies popping up on YouTube or in other places when the prices are cheap. That's actually the worst time to do it because when prices are cheap, I actually want to be long, right? For example, if I'm running this setup with ETH to USDC, I don't want to hedge when the price is so low because if I short here and the market pumps, my short are very likely to be liquidated and the risk and reward ratio is much better to stick to crypto pools or to just have a more bullish LP setup without a hedge when the prices are cheap. So I only like these setups when I think that the price is a little bit overheated and I might only have a partial hedge, like in this case of Hype, because the token is so strong. I could definitely see it reaching $50 or $61 and I would basically get liquidated, but still my liquidation point is much higher than if I just started doing this at like $15, right? So I hope that helps, guys. There are a lot more videos on my channel about yield farming. This hedge setup is more of an advanced strategy. So if you're just starting out and this is too complex, then don't worry about it. There are plenty of content on my video channel that is aimed for beginners and intermediate users. Thanks for watching. I'll catch you guys next time.